Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the February Spark session at Spark Freedom. We have two wonderful guests today who are going to talk us through integrating marketing strategies into your media strategies, and I'm really excited to hear what they have to say. But before we get started, I wanted to remind you that our next Spark session will be on March 16th, actually, at 12 p.m. Eastern. We might have to wear green anyway, since that's so close to St. Patty's Day. So definitely tune in if you want to hear what that speaker has to say. We haven't chosen a speaker yet. I've had a mysterious speaker in the works for 2 months, and I'm pretty sure that they'll come through for next time. But if not, we'll have a fun topic for you to talk to. Okay, so today on this one, we have Barb Ford and Sean Malone. And if you haven't ever heard of either of these two, you're going to love them. They know so much about what they're doing, and they're making big differences in the freedom marketing world as well as just the marketing world. Barb comes to us with a long history of brand category management, strategic planning, measuring success, and making decisions based on results or no results. I asked her a question earlier about something, and she was laughing because she said, well, the answer to that is somebody needs to be fired. So she can be a little hard, but she's also friendly. And then Sean Malone from Fee is here with us. And a lot of people have noticed that Fee's doing something a little different recently. He is their director of media and really knows how to tell a good story. And he is aware of production from beginning to end. And he also, the thing I like about Sean is he understands that if you make the video, they won't necessarily come. So with that, we're going to launch into questions. And Barb, I'm going to start with you with question number one. And this came to us from about 3 sources in the last few weeks. So
interesting.
Yeah, so this is a summary of 3 people's questions, and it goes something like this. This year, I measured very little growth in the number of people I'm reaching with our message. What steps should I take to change this? Because everything we've done in the past is simply not working anymore.
So it almost sounds like farmers in the 30s. I keep plowing the same field and the crops are getting less dense. What do I do? Some things that I would need to know before I could really answer this question for an individual is, what have you done in the past? What reaction did you get from those activities in the past? But I would really start way upstream and say, one, what is your marketing strategy? What do you want to communicate? And is what you want to communicate of interest to your target? Or have you created an interesting enough, compelling enough message that they might stop and look at it? And what vehicles have you tried? Do they fit in a common sense way with your strategies and your target audience? So here's my perfect for instance. Charitable organization goes out and not political, but charitable, goes out and sets up their Facebook page, and they are trying to reach millennials. And they just don't seem to be getting any reaction from millennials on their Facebook page. Well, not many millennials spend a lot of time on Facebook unless they're communicating with their mothers. And B, they haven't got a message that's compelling enough. Connect me with I actually have recently gotten this, allow me to connect with other like-minded individuals in other countries. That's not going to happen in a static environment. Sean's advice might be different, but I think that if you do a compelling video on a topic that is of arresting interest, that then needs to go through the proper channels to reach the target audience you want. You cannot just leave it sitting out there on YouTube and expect someone to click on it randomly. So things I'd consider: target audience, who are they and what are they interested in? Is your message of interest to your target audience? and do the vehicles that you're attempting to use make a common sense fit? I know people can't go do tons of research, but just common sense. Does it fit with who you're trying to reach and what your message is?
But what is Snapchat and why do people like it? Oh, Sean, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I couldn't agree more with most of what you said, Barb. I think that the idea that you just, like, YouTube has, gosh, something like 30 billion users a month or something like that. And, hundreds of thousands of videos being uploaded every minute, right? I mean, you would be completely, and Facebook is growing, it's becoming the same way. And Facebook's almost worse in a way because people are constantly scrolling through stuff. At least with YouTube, people are generally looking to watch video, whereas Facebook, it's just kind of whatever pops up. You are being drowned out by millions and millions of other competing pieces of information. So if your whole strategy revolves around just dropping a video on YouTube and then going, okay, well, we'll see what happens, you're really probably not going to succeed that well from that standpoint. And I think there's a number of different ways to approach that. I think that it's different for different kinds of media products, at least in my experience. So for example, Fee has just recently put out a short animated piece telling the story of an inventor, and I actually don't want to give it away because it's got kind of a twist ending or whatever, but it's about ending. Trying to, right? But it's about an inventor in the 1800s. It's a pretty interesting story, and I animated it, and I felt like it's a pretty beautiful story. And then what we did was we knew that we wanted to try to target exactly to your point, Barb. I wrote up 5 potential target audience segments that I thought might be interested in this story. Mm-hmm. And then we used a very small amount of money on Facebook, put that video in these individual segments. And then we tried to discover which one of these or 2 of these or whatever, which ones were most interested, which were least interested. And then we put a little bit more advertising money towards the ones that were most interested, right? And all in, and I'm very proud of this. We ended up with 115 or so thousand views on that video on Facebook, and we only spent about $400 advertising. So
awesome.
It's a great return, but part of that came from, 1, compelling content, starting with content that is worth watching, or at least that we believe is worth watching.
Yeah.
And then 2, doing a little bit of testing. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money, right? Like, just do a little bit of that common sense, like, who is this for? Mm-hmm. Who is it for? And then experiment a little bit before you either drop a ton of money or you do nothing, right? Like, both of those options tend to be bad options. Now, by contrast, I just put up the first episode of a what will be an ongoing sort of video podcast series with a couple economists. And I've told them this. I've told people on my team this. I literally don't care how many views that gets. That first episode is one of what is supposed to be an ongoing series. So the goal for this next couple months is to prove that in this case, every Wednesday, we're going to have a new episode, and that we can grow an audience organically. I don't want to advertise it yet. I don't want to spend much money on it.
Yep.
All I want to do is prove to people that every Wednesday there will be a new episode, and just see what organically happens. And then in a few weeks, I'll start caring how many views they're getting and what that looks like and what we might want to do for.
Well, and Sean, that points out a dramatic flaw that occurs often. People start out saying, we're going to do this every Wednesday, and they do it for the first 3 or 4 Wednesdays, and then it becomes a sporadic thing, and then they don't understand why nobody goes back every 5th Wednesday when they decided to get off their butt and redo it.
Right.
So you could probably promote the first one after you've gotten several.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I've seen that too. I've seen that for years, and it's I think some of it is that people don't realize how hard it is actually to produce things consistently.
Yes. Yep.
Because it actually does take a lot of effort and a lot of planning. And you know, in this case, we went through several rounds of tests. And it's also a weird thing for us because the economists are basically filming their segments remotely. And then I'm collecting that information and editing it and you know, adding graphics and stuff like that. So we had to develop a process, right? And we had to develop a process that I had a good feeling was going to be usable long term, and that I could eventually take myself out of, that I could give this to an intern, or I could give this to somebody else and have them be able to actually execute. Because otherwise this would never happen, because it would be this Wednesday and the next 3 or 4, and it'd be too hard and everybody just quit. Right?
Hysterical reinventing of the wheel every Wednesday is not going to help.
No. So, yeah, I've seen that so often. And then the other side of that I've seen too is that people expect that the first episode is going to be this huge, massive hit. And then when it's not, they get sad and they're like, well, nobody cares. But again, back to that point of look at how many options are competing for people's attention.
Oh yeah.
Who knows, right? Like nobody saw it. That doesn't mean that it's bad. It means you need to give it a little bit of breathing room. And simultaneously, don't blow your nest egg on advertising that first one, right? Like just let it breathe, let it find itself a little bit, and then it'll be.
Yes. Well, I like your idea of testing it on Facebook if that's your, you know, with different target audiences.
Right.
And keep it simple, but make sure that you give it time to grow too. So, and that it makes common sense. I think that's one of the biggest issues I've got is that I was thrilled to hear you say economist and I add graphics. So it's not talking head.
No, I'm trying to make it, in this case, it's more talking head than I would normally do, but it's short. You know, I'm trying to keep it fairly short, and this is getting ahead of to where Nicole had one of my sort of questions, but I want them to keep it, and I've been pushing so hard, I want them to keep it conversational.
Yeah.
I want this to not be talking heads in the sense of two guys telling you what to think, but rather this is just a window into an economist and a political scientist who have, you know, decent senses of humor and, you know, who have decent rapport because they're buddies. So it's just a window into their conversation. And that, I think, you know, makes it a little bit more compelling than your standard talking head thing. And then over time, you know, I think the feeling for me is if it does well, then we can add more to it, right? We can amp up the production value and all that kind of stuff.
So great.
Okay, so I'm going to take a pause here to just remind our viewers that if you want to ask a question, I'll be taking them at the end. There is a Q&A button on your screen. Just click it and type your question in. I don't always see the ones in chat, although you can put them in chat, but if you can hit the Q&A tool, that will help us organize your questions for afterwards. Sean, I thought it was funny you brought that example up of, you know, people putting a lot of money into the first time on a podcast or a blog or something. I think you both know I launched a personal podcast last summer about homesteading and self-reliance, and my first few episodes got like 11 listens, and I can name to you the 11 people.
Your mother
were listening, and I get all these questions about like what kind of production to use. I'm like, it didn't matter for those first episodes. I mean, I happened to have a condenser mic that was sitting in my office that I could not hook up to my computer, and I just recorded it over this speaker right here, and it sounds like I did. And it was more, as you said, building the habit and the consistency, and now people know, you know, what day of the week at this point. So it's kind of fun to watch that organic growth. I haven't put $1 into advertising the thing, and it is starting to grow. So
that's great to hear. One of the things when I was talking to our COO yesterday about, you know, about this video podcast idea and you know where we're going to go with it and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that I had to kind of remind him of, and it's a thing that sort of comes from seeing the growth of YouTube and seeing one of the nice things about YouTube is you can watch people who are incredibly successful in that platform today, you can literally either you're
Go
me.
back and watch.
Yeah, you're me, and you were there at the beginning in like 2006, watching their very first episodes and seeing what they were. But even most of those are still available. So you can go to somebody's incredibly successful channel and then click on their oldest video and see where they started and where they are today.
Yeah.
And on some of the people who have millions of subscribers, you see awful production values.
Yep.
At the beginning, right? Bad sound, bad video. Sometimes it's black. I mean, actually, you know, for a lot of people, webcams were black and white at the beginning, right? 2005, 2006, 7 territory. A lot of webcams were just black and white. They're terrible, you know? And then today, there are people who are being sponsored by Ford, right?
Yeah.
Well, and that's the slow organic growth that some people just don't want to take the time for. Yeah. But also, and Nicole knows this, I wrote a weekly newspaper column for 25 years. The consistency of making that deadline every single week, still, it's daunting, and you have to be ready to invest the time.
But it makes you
the focus.
But it makes you better as well. As you do it, you get better, and you learn things that, and some of these things are like hard to explain, like just the way your processes change and the way you get more efficient about certain things, you know.
And you'll get smarter about your message. But what that forces you to do is look at, if I'm investing this time, is it on strategy for my organization? Am I supporting what our focus is supposed to be? You know? And some people wake up in the middle of it and go, wrong answer.
Right.
You have to be brave enough to take it offline if you're not really supporting what you're supposed to be supporting.
Okay, Sean, I have a question for you, which is, what are the top 1 to 2 things you see people doing wrong when they approach a new video project?
Oh, man. You know, Barb pretty much covered it at the beginning. I think people don't think probably the top one is, who is this for? Ask yourself, if you're making it for you, that's fine, by the way. It can be like, there are so many artistic projects that people make where the answer is, I made it for me. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was fun. I wanted to do it. It was cool. Great. But that, if you want that to be for you, you have to recognize that you didn't make it for an audience. And if you didn't make it for an audience, then trying to cram it down other people's throats often not going to work, right? Like you can't be niche about these things if your goal is sharing with a wide array of people. So the step 1 has to be, ask yourself, if it wasn't just you who was watching, why would they be watching this? What are they getting out of it? And really just kind of comes back to that customer focus idea of just like, who is this for? You know, and if you start there, I think that's the big one for me, because I see it done wrong constantly. I see people, particularly in sort of liberty-focused organizations, you see this a lot, where it's, you know, a policy team or the executive team, management, whatever, goes, we like this, we think this is interesting, but then you realize that they're all PhD economists.
Yeah.
And maybe they aren't representative of the entire range of audiences out there, you know. And so you end up with organizations that have media products that are wildly mismatched to their actual mission. So like, if their mission is to reach high school students, or if it's to reach college students, and then all the products that they're making are geared towards 50-year-old PhDs, that, you know, like that's a huge departure from what you're actually trying to do. So that I think is the top for me. But then I think on a more practical note, people need to develop better quality standards across the board. There are, I mean, really basic things like making sure your sound quality is good, making sure your audio is good, or your lighting is good. Like, if you don't know how to do that stuff, find somebody who can either consult with you or who can help you as a friend or whatever else. But I mean, I think a lot of times people forget that stuff, and there's there's a minimum baseline, you know, and I think that baseline is rising as audiences, as particularly user-generated content gets better and better and better, and people are starting to include effects and graphics, and they're getting better at the techniques of filmmaking, you know, and techniques of recording in their basements, in their home studios, and whatever. Organizations cannot afford to be bad at this kind of stuff. They cannot afford to put out poorly crafted products now, and I still see that quite often, which I think is really unfortunate.
Yep. Okay, Barb.
Yes,
you
ma'am.
Ready for a question?
Question 2.
Question 2. I've had my marketing strategy in place for a number of years, but I'm having trouble getting people on staff to use it. This is one we hear a lot. So what can I put in place to get my peers to use the strategy?
So I have like 3 simple steps, and people who have worked with me get bored and tired of hearing these 3 simple steps. First, make sure that everyone has a copy of your marketing strategy and message strategy. This should be a single page of paper that has very clearly delineated message and marketing strategy. You know, and if you have a brand character, put that on there, and make sure that your whole team understands where it came from. And obviously it should be fitting, as Sean mentioned, it should fit with the mission of the organization and be in the language of the participants so that they can understand what the message strategy is. Second, every single time you are considering any marketing activity, not just video, but like if you're going to, I don't know, put together a poster or a brochure or anything you're considering doing, you pull out that single sheet of paper and walk through your strategy and ask yourself and the team that's going to work on the activity, does the activity fit with your overall strategy? And a strategy should include an objective, the way you believe you're going to reach that objective, and what target audience you are going after. If you do that every time, say Sean is bringing me an idea for a new video. Yeah. If he walks into my office and he says, Barb, this is the message strategy for, I don't know, so-and-so, and this is their marketing strategy, and here is a basic outline or storyboard of what I think they should be doing. He knows that my next question is going to be, how do you see that storyboard fitting with that message strategy and target audience? And if he walks into a CEO's office with that previously thought through, maybe he brings 2 or 3 alternatives in, and he says, I think A fits better because of this, that, or the other thing. But he gives them 1 or 2 alternatives. Usually the team, if they continuously keep that strategy in their hands, they can A, convince CEOs that they know what they're doing, that they're cognizant of the mission of the organization, and that they can come up with compelling messages and marketing activities that fit with the program. So it's pretty simple. Keep the document alive, make sure everybody understands it, and use it every time you have a copy meeting or a message strategy meeting.
Yeah, I have to say, though, people get annoyed with me because they'll be like, oh, no, she's asking the questions again, and I don't care.
It's well, here's the thing. The question is, do you want your organization to have a consistent quality brand that they can be proud of, or do they want to look scattered, smothered, and covered? You know?
Yeah. Well, I was really happy to hear from Sean that he was in a pitch meeting right before this call.
Yeah.
Which means he's pitching to his peers what he wants to do, and he has to answer all those questions, right, Sean?
This I do. However, this was the other way around. This is I had people pitching us
Oh, okay.
A new project.
So he was asking the questions.
So yes, I was the asker of these kinds of questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all those questions absolutely came up. Who do we see the audience for this being? How is this going to reflect Fee's overall brand? Which, by the way, one of the very first things that I did when I came to Fee, which was back in the beginning of August of last year, was revitalize their brand standards. So I went through and I made a new document of, and I actually redesigned a handful of things. And then we had conversations about what our tone would be and who our general audience would be. And then one of the first things that we're actually doing this year, and I owe a marketing research firm some notes actually in the next couple of days. But we're actually commissioning a survey to be done to develop audience personas and things like that. So we have an even better understanding of who we want to target and why. All these things are crucially important. I did want to share with you, one of the things I also made early on when I came here was a process map, which I guess, I don't know, we can send around or I can show people.
Yeah, we can.
But in that process map, it's the sort of the decision-making framework for how and why we would approve a given project,
Awesome.
create a media project. And there are 5 steps to that. And I think, Barb, you'll appreciate all of these. 1, does this project fit Fee's strategic vision? 2, is this project likely to reach Fee's target audience? Will this project create opportunities to research the effectiveness of creative media, which is a big part of our overall current ongoing grant-funded project that we're doing? 4, will this project create opportunities for new partnerships? And 5, does this project have a clear goal and call to action?
Awesome. So it sounds to me like steps 3 and 4 are kind of specific checkpoints for you guys on what you're doing. I'd love it if you could send that around, and your document, your brand document.
Sure, yeah.
So that we've got examples that we can walk people through.
Yeah, I mean, I think Fee was having a real problem, honestly, with brand, because, and I mean this across the board. I don't just mean the visible logos and colors and all that kind of stuff. I think it was having a problem there too. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here at all. I think a lot of people have acknowledged this at Fee for the last few years, until fairly recently. Like it was kind of all over the place. They had a lot of different branding plays and websites, and a lot of different things that weren't totally clear who they were for or why. They were experimenting with a lot of different kinds of things. And one of the biggest problems I had actually coming in was exactly this overall question of kind of wrangling people to get them to understand that you can't just do whatever, whenever, and put.
It's Tuesday. You want to do?
Well, I would see people putting like low res JPEGs, like rasterized images of our logo that were pixelated and terrible on. And you just have to just start. It's like whack-a-mole in a way. Like you're kind of like, no, okay, no, not that. No, we got to do something different here, and then okay, we got to do something different here. But eventually, over time, as you do that, you start to not only build trust, I think, which is a big part of it. People have to trust that you have the overall best interest in mind. But then also, you just have to have conversations over and over. Like, no, look, if you want to do a new Facebook cover image, or if you want to do a new thing, come to me. We'll talk about it, and I'll ask all of these questions, right?
Well, in the end, you help them because they're not wasting their time or yours.
Yeah. And then we, I think, I'm proud to feel like the results have spoken for themselves. I think Fee in the last 6 months, or even over the last year or so, has dramatically improved.
Yeah.
In its clarity of vision and brand. I think it's a lot more on point today than it has been.
Well, and the clarity of vision and brand are the critical element. They're like the starting point, so that if If you've said we are going forth with this mission, and then it looks like a mishmash of 20 different ideas, you lose your original mission.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I have a question in from our audience, and the question is, how often should organizations revamp or renew their strategic marketing plan? Which key staff should play an active role in the process?
Okay, so I'll answer it from my standpoint, and then Sean, you've just been through a re-entry into it.
Yeah.
But it is my personal belief that once an organization has gone through the hard work of really articulating their critical mission, their target audience, their marketing and message strategies and objectives, that should be a document that lives for many years. So one of the brands that I work with that was down here with me yesterday, they have had the same marketing strategy for, hold on to your socks, 25 years. But they are one of the nation's most recognized consumer brands. Why? Because they've had the same strategy. They have not executed the same thing every year for 25 years. Their target audience has remained the same, which means if you're trying to attract and maintain a customer-consumer relationship with someone who's between the ages of 15 and 35, well, the 35-year-olds graduate at a certain point. Yeah. So you have to have new executions and new ideas coming in, but they all have to fit with that strategy. I think the worst thing that I see happen is that people quickly develop a strategy, land on it, don't really do the hard thinking up front, and then they want to change their strategy every year, which leads to brand confusion and actually organization confusion. You can have lots of employees who don't understand, what am I contributing to? What is it that I'm doing? How do I fit into this grand scheme if we keep changing what our objectives are? And literally our target audience.
Right.
So I don't know, Sean, you just been through this.
Yeah, Sean, what's your take?
Well, I've been through this at FEE to a degree. I think actually FEE was more getting back to its core. Actually, I think FEE, what FEE has done is sort of returned to what it was founded to be in 1946. Like, it was always meant to be kind of the tip of the spear, I guess, in terms of ideas. It was the most mass outreach. I mean, Leonard Reed was a marketing guy. I mean, that was he was an advertising, So
if you could encapsulate the FEE mission in a sentence, which I'm sure you can do.
I can. I'm not going to
reading it from your wall right now.
The mission statement version, but FEE's goal is to be the first point of positive contact with our ideas, with libertarian, classical liberal ideas, to what we call the rising generation, younger, new audiences. Every year it's going to be a slightly new audience, but our goal is younger people. And FEE used to kind of have this mission. I don't think it was ever explicitly younger people, but the original mission, I mean, the reason why they published the Freeman for 60 years was to be a mass distributed magazine, right? Yeah. That was the goal. The reason why, we were just having a conversation about this earlier today, Leonard Reed, long before any kind of Creative Commons licensing schemes, Leonard Reed allowed anyone to republish any article found in the Freeman magazine since the 50s.
He probably considered it a win.
He did, because his goal was dissemination of ideas. So he wanted as wide a reach as possible. And I think FEE kind of went into this kind of heady academic territory like a lot of think tanks do, and kind of lost that for a little while. And I think we're just getting it back. But I've also been through a bunch of other, I'd spent 4 years in an organization where, there was functionally a new brand every 6 months or so.
Oh, that's scary.
They would go from one big project to another huge project. And every 6 or 8 months, we would all get called into a big, staff meeting where they just announced this new grand vision, and it, you know, all the things that we were working on last week were just going to be scrapped, and we're going to work on a totally different vision. And that, it's horrifying, because you can't build anything. You can't build on anything. And I think it also comes back to this idea of it takes time, you know. Barb, I love your point. I mean, you look at Coca-Cola, right? Mm-hmm. Like, Coca-Cola has had fundamentally the same marketing for decades.
Yes.
Right? It is summer fun, families, friends, over some hot dogs or whatever, right? Like, that's Coca-Cola is your family and love and friendly American life, right?
Yeah.
And it's been that way for years and years and years. And every year they come up with great new campaigns, but it's always that, and it always feels like that. And that's, you know, that's powerful, you know. And I don't think any liberty organization has done that at all.
And that I believe that when liberty organizations start doing that and avoid, it's strategic whiplash if you run from, so.
Boy, well, no, and I mean,
a great term.
You end up wasting so much time and money, because you see entire, you know, like new logos that get designed and new color schemes get built, and you pay for swag and you get all this stuff, and then suddenly, like 8 months later, you go, nope, don't need it anymore. Well,
and you're actually breaking your employees' hearts every time.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've lost people over it, and I've never blamed them, right? Like, I mean, I've seen people go because they'd spent so much time invested in one thing, only to have it overturned, and of course they quit, you know. And I can't. It's hard to blame them when that happens, you know.
So my answer, Nicole, to wrap this one up, my answer is take the time and invest the intellectual hardship up front so that you have a clear organizational mission, and then make sure that your marketing objectives and strategy support that mission. That helps to reduce, like, if it's a marketing strategy thing, it helps. Then you can, once you get that and you say to yourself, this has to stand for at least 3 to 5 years, maybe more, then your quarterly strategic review should be, what are we doing that's on the path? What are we doing that needs to be adjusted to get back on the path? And what are things that we have started doing that will lead us off the path and into the swamp? That makes it much easier. You can do the annual strategic review, I suggest, where you look at all your activities and grade them and work with the people who were involved with why did we do it that way, so that we understand how we get on and off the path. But for the most part, keep your brand character and your strategic plan consistent over time, and you will have happier employees, more delighted donors, and probably you'll start reaching more of your target audience more powerfully over time.
Yeah, I think what I'm getting out of today's conversation is spending the time up front, which everybody knows I'm all about that anyway, to get things set up the right way. I mean, it's why I think I spend maybe 20% of my time every year convincing people it's a good idea to turn off your email for 3 whole days and develop your plan. And that gets you like 6 months to 3 years of time saved. But it's really hard because we always have all these crises coming in. And yeah, okay, you're in the middle of a legislative session, you're a think tank. Maybe that's not the best time to develop your organizational brand. Wait, stop, you know, but there are times of year when you could do that. I think the other thing is the consistency piece that came early on. Like, you can have the plan, you can have the strategy, but if you're not consistent, like if I can't count on the vlog that Fee is putting out with the policy guys every Wednesday,
then why show up?
Then what can I count on?
Yeah.
That's a trust building thing too.
Right.
It is. It is.
And the consistency of checking back to how you fit with your strategy.
Yeah.
That's a pretty simple, easy way.
Yeah.
It's brainless. You pull the sheet of paper out, you look at what you're doing and go, oh.
We also need to be able to do that. We need good benchmarks, and we need good goals.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I think one of the things that is really smart to do for everybody is to start thinking about, like, really early on in this process, think about where you want to be in a year and what do you think is reasonable, and start looking at other products that are sort of out there in the overall market. I also, by the way, this is kind of an aside to this point, but I am a huge fan of getting away from, or pushing people to get away from, comparing your work in a nonprofit to other nonprofits. To top level commercial industry. Compare it to media industry. If you're a website that produces regular content, written content, articles or blogs or whatever, like, compare it to the best blogs on the internet. Don't compare it to, some other nonprofit's blog. That's silly. Like, that's just aiming low. I mean, like, why would we do that? Right?
Yeah.
Like, what do they say in shooting, I guess, aim small, miss small. Or like aim high, and like, even if you shoot for the stars, shoot for the moon, and if you miss, you'll hit the stars or whatever. Yeah. I mean, you got to start there. And look, you might not hit it, but like, you'll at least be starting with a benchmark that is worthy.
Yes. Well, and worthy of your personal work, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're a marketing geek. So.
Yeah. At the same time, you can't let all of that get in the way of something like a blog, going through the mechanics of, I recorded it, I edited it, I produced it, I put 301 words of description, like all of those mechanics.
Yeah.
Like, the first time I produced my podcast, it took me 12 hours. Now it takes me 4 every week. And I have the same 4 blocked out every week. But it took me a while to go from all that time. Like, one of the questions I didn't get to ask, is we have to wrap up here, but was the question of, I just spent, 2.5 weeks getting my first blog out, basically, and it took a lot of editing. What can I do to make this better?
Yeah.
Part of it is do it every week.
Yeah. I mean, that's honestly, that is the best answer. I mean, I think every specific case, I mean, I would be more than happy to give anybody specific advice on technical stuff anytime. But honestly, Nicole, that's exactly the right answer. Is you do it, you get better, and you figure out the process that really works for you. Because some of the stuff that takes a lot of time is not setting up the equipment or recording it or whatever. Some of it is just flat out thinking through the right idea, and thinking through how you're going to frame different issues and things like that. So a lot of it comes down to how much time you need to write. And then some of it is also a performance issue. How much time do you need to get good takes of things? Or are you comfortable just winging it and on the fly kind of going through? But that's such an individualized question for people.
That makes sense. And the other question I didn't get to ask, which I'm going to throw out, and you guys have 30 seconds each to answer this. I'm going down to the core of it, which is basically, how much money should I plan to promote my project or video? Sean, you want to go first?
Sure. If you can, double your production budget. Basically, like, if whatever your production budget is, plan the same amount of money for marketing. If that's not an option, then get really creative and start going out of your way to connect with influencers and try to build relationships with people. Go the relationship route. But otherwise, I mean, you should do that anyway, by the way. But yeah, if you can, just production budget times 2, there it is.
Well, and I would have to say, I wouldn't even, there's no number specifically. It's like, what is your objective? But this idea of creating relationship with influencers, particularly in the social media world, is critical long-term, because then you're leveraging every dollar.
Yes.
But Sean already set an example that $400, you got 115,000 or 150,000 views.
You can do it.
You just have to be careful and creative and think through and have a message they want and a content piece they want to listen to.
Yeah. And I will say too, like that's almost a rule breaking example for even what I just said, because that was less than a tenth of our budget for the project itself. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be that much, but it's, get the content right and you can go, like, you can stretch those dollars a long way. But that's, yeah.
And I guess my perspective on that is I've seen a lot of groups put, they've barely gathered the $1,500 or $5,000 or $12,000 or whatever they're doing. There's different scales to make the video. And they didn't even think that once the video's made, there's more money that needs to be invested in the form of time, graphic design for promotion, advertising, if you're going to do advertising, like all of those things. And so they put the video out and they're like, behold, and then nothing happens. And I mean, like, we're all guilty of it. I did that too.
Sure.
But it's just so important to think about that piece before you make the video, rather than, okay, now I have the video, now what's my plan?
I think that might be the better lesson there anyway, is regardless of your budget, think it through, right? Regardless of what you can spend or whatever, and this is another thing, figure out what your budget is going to be before you even start. And then you can start making these sorts of judgment calls about how much you'll have, and that'll inform your strategy too, right? Like if you have no money for marketing, then you're going to have to do a lot of groundwork. You're going to have to start emailing people. You're going to have to start trying to build relationships with people, and you'll have to do that early,
Yeah, and then your strategy is more relationship.
Right.
And Nicole, one last thing I wanted to say is you don't have to take 3 days out of the office to do good strategic thinking.
Yes, that's
you
true.
can do this in 4-hour chunks, and make it kind of a habitual event, just like creating a blog where you sit down.
That's true.
Yeah. And
actually, Barb and I have been doing some advising over using this system actually with teams, and it takes less time if we do it in person, I would say.
Yes. And it's more concentrated.
It's more concentrated, but you can start the process digitally, or you can if you allocate time. I think the key to remember is you're not doing it in one 4-hour chunk.
No, it's several 4-hour chunks.
And there's work in between it, just like it. So it's not it's not something you do quickly and have the best results. I haven't met the person yet who makes a strategic plan in 20 minutes.
Do you guys have, I'm curious, do you guys have a perspective on the sort of max number of people that need to be involved in those conversations? Because I feel like a lot of times the way too many cooks get involved, and then suddenly, becomes a mess.
If you're doing it, if it's my personal belief that you are best off keeping it 15 or less. I do a lot of facilitation now for Rotary International. We get 30 people in a room. And then it's critical that you have a really well facilitated, clear process up front.
Yep.
And that you maybe have 2 facilitators in the room.
Yeah.
So that it's well managed. If you are doing it in a Zoom meeting, basically, I think 6 or 8 is as many as you can, who can really contribute.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And then you have to have a process where you enroll others between the meetings in this is what we got done, what's your reaction kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
and I would say.
Yeah, I did it for a university with 175 angry professors.
Yeah, don't do that.
I'm still alive.
Yeah, the answer. See, I like 9.
9
is my favorite number. I'm happy with 15. When we start getting over 15, it adds time, and you have to ask who are the people,
the decision makers,
there,
the influencers.
Yeah, and I guess it all depends on the situation. On a Zoom meeting, the other thing is we've done this with just one person. And that's not as good as if there are perspectives. And that's just because, you know, it was a startup and we brought different people in from time to time, but that was who worked there, was that one person. So, and who started it. So, and that's helpful, but that's sort of a different, you're not getting your strategic plan for the long term if you don't have your board involved in some of the other perspectives. So, yeah, good question. Okay. Well, thanks both of you for chiming in. I actually have another couple questions here. Oh, somebody said a comment, odd numbers for voting purposes. Yeah, that's why my number is 9 and not 8. And why I think Barbie said 15, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of funny. Yeah, I always get a little leery when it's like 6 and I'm like, oh no, we're going to be tied. But usually we get there anyway. Anyway, thanks for spending time. It was really helpful for us to hear from you, Sean, and from you, Barb.
Thank you.
For the people who are still here, a couple people have jumped off because I went overtime, which I almost never do. March 15th, 16th. Why do I keep saying the 15th? March 16th. It's right up there on my calendar. The third Thursday at noon. Speaking of consistency, in case you ever are confused, we'll have another Spark session on a specific topic. Actually, Sean, you just gave me another idea for another topic, so I might talk to you afterwards.
Awesome.
We couldn't do it in time for March. Okay, great. Okay. Thanks,
Terrific.
everybody.
Thanks. You.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.